Good evening and welcome to this week in review. Tonight's stories include Lions Regional Speak-Off, Spawn make recommendations for changes to the 2002 Salmon Management Plan, Lions presentation to CEO of the RCSCC Bob Bartlett. These stories plus community events, the BBS Playbill, Off the Rack and more coming up after this.
It's the only planet known to sustain life. The only one whose atmosphere has been regulated by nature to create the perfect balance. But today the Earth is warming, and nature's not doing it. Fortunately, all of us know someone who has the power to do something.
On Saturday, March the 16th, we were invited to the Lions Regional Speak-Off. This was the first time that the Regional Speak-Off was held in Burgeo. The event got underway at 1 p.m. at the community centre. There were 4 contestants scheduled to speak. Unfortunately, the contestant from Stephenville Crossing was unable to make it. Lion Max Pink was MC for the afternoon and read the requirements for the Speak-Off. The judges for the event were Norman Marsden, David MacDonald, and Elaine Spencer. The questioners were Constable Ron Caldwell and Rose Vatcher. Speaker number 1 was Ryan Bailey from St. James I in Port aux Basques.
Ladies, gentlemen, guests, honorable judges, and fellow speakers, hello and good day. Today I'm here to answer a question that has been on many people's minds lately. Should Canada be involved in the war against terrorism? Now, normally when I hear this question, I become a little angry, because the first thought that enters my head is, of course not. Why should we send our soldiers, our friends, and our family into a war zone where some of them might not return? But after some thought and careful consideration, my opinion has changed. This war isn't just about stopping terrorism or getting vengeance on some foreign threat. It's about keeping everyone safe. On September 11th, a day that no one will ever forget, the United States of America was attacked by a terrorist network. The attack wasn't made on some government shipment or military base. They attacked and killed innocent civilians, men, women, and children that had no idea their lives would be forfeited by some fanatic group that, to this day, 6 months later, is only just now being cornered. Not to mention the loss of the firefighters and the police that were just trying to save more human lives. Not one soul amongst the 2,936 victims deserved that horrendous fate. Not one of them. Yet, what do these numbers mean? I'll tell you. It means that husbands and wives won't be coming home to their spouse. It means that children will have to grow up with only a single loving parent. It means that some truly unfortunate children will not have any parents coming home. It means that families will never again get to see their loved ones.
Jennifer Riel from Piccadilly was up next.
You'd never think of silence as eliciting memories both frightening and wonderful. You'd never think that is a silence that can change the world. I mean, silence doesn't seem that extraordinary, does it? Hello, ladies and gentlemen, fellow speakers, and honorable judges. My topic is the terrorist attack of September 11th, 2001. How has the world changed? The world shook with the news of the attack. Fear in an already fear-inspiring world increased. Suddenly there were just so many more dangers out there just waiting to pounce on you. Fear. You see, we realized we could be hit at any time, anywhere. People started to panic. In once financial stable world, they were faced with loss of jobs or stock markets plummeting. Security became a huge issue, so security was put in place. Airport lines got way longer, and people got way tenser. Yet, not all the byproducts of this were bad. In the early morning hours after the attack, fear was put aside, and courage took its place. Firefighters, doctors, volunteers each took up the call to help their fellow man. People started to help people more. Here in Newfoundland, we did our best to make those stranded as comfortable as possible. We opened our hearts and our homes. But lately, has something else been creeping into our hearts, into our minds? You know, it's sad, but lately people have been being judged by their ethnic background. I actually heard someone say, we shouldn't let those people on our planes.
Melanie Durnford was speaker number 3.
His bearded face flickered across the television screens mere hours after the attack. His name, repeated as the single most likely suspect for so much death and destruction. Even prior to September the 11th, 2001, Osama bin Laden, a 44-year-old Saudi-born multi-millionaire, was America's most wanted man. Today, he's the world's. Good afternoon, judges, questioners, members of the Lion and Lioness clubs, fellow speakers and guests. The topic I have chosen to speak on this afternoon is terrorism. More specifically, the tragic events of September the 11th, 2001. Death, destruction, fear, pain. Those were the words everyone heard and felt in the United States of America and around most of the world on September the 11th. The terrorists did more than topple the World Trade Center towers, blow a hole in the Pentagon outside of Washington, and drop a 4th airliner into a Pennsylvania field. They tore deeply into the financial heart of the United States, causing major stock exchanges to close for days. The events left thousands upon thousands of passengers stranded in airports all across North America. Air traffic was at a standstill for the first time in history. These flying bombs killed an estimated 3,850 people, more than double the number who perished at Pearl Harbor. The president once said, "A date which shall live in infamy, the United States of America, democracy, and the free world were suddenly and deliberately attacked."
While the judges were busy choosing the winner, Lion Max Pink gave some background information on each of the contestants. A short time later, the judges came forward with the winners.
The second runner-up was speaker number 1. Speaker number 1, Ryan Bailey.
Good job. Good job.
The first runner-up, speaker number 2, Jimmy. And the winner of today's speaker, Melanie.
Well done.
We congratulate Melanie and wish her the best of luck at Stephenville on April the 27th. A new salmon management plan will be introduced to anglers for the 2002 season. Spahn has made some recommendations for the changes in this plan. Spahn basically made 5 recommendations. Enforcement has suffered over the past few years. In 1970, there were 14 fishery officers as well as 78 individual river guardians. Today, there are 26 fishery officers with marine waters priority, and the river guardian complement is reduced to 43 for the same geographic inland area. A few years ago, a $10 increase was added to the angler's license as a way to increase enforcement, but to date, we feel the promised increase has not occurred. When asked what happened, the provincial government, which collects the fee, simply put it into general revenues. The tag presently used is not acceptable. A new improved tag was promised in 2000 and then for 2001 angling season. This did not happen. We feel that a better tag will ultimately protect the honest angler because most anglers know the present tags can be opened and reused. The absence of tags from farm-raised Atlantic salmon creates much potential for abuse, since it is difficult to distinguish between farm-raised and wild salmon. Aquaculture tags will help stem the sale of illegal salmon. The present opening and closing dates of different zones and rivers is very confusing. We suggest that all rivers open and close on the same dates, with release angling only during the first and last few weeks of the season. This will allow angling in May and September, plus allow many fish to reach the spawning beds. Rivers west of Springdale on the west coast basically stay status quo under the new plan. We have asked for the area above the fishway at Torrent River to be open for release angling only, since it is overseeded, and in addition to offering more angling opportunities, it will relieve some pressure on the lower sections. We have also asked for more protection on the upper Big East River watershed due to the easy access by wood roads. We have one of the best recreational fisheries in the world. We need to have in place the systems that allow a sustainable yield to present anglers, as well as ensuring that our children and grandchildren will have the opportunity to enjoy the same resource. If there is any better feeling for an angler than hooking the first fish of the season or a big fish, it would certainly be assisting your son or daughter in hooking their first fish. Spahn's main philosophy remains conservation and equal access for all anglers. On Thursday of this week, Mr. Wayne Vivian's grade 7 class were dropping eggs from the school roof. Mr. Vivian explains. To explain to us what we were just doing about dropping eggs off a roof?
Well, as I said to you on the telephone the other day, this class, grade 7s, as part of the new Atlantic Province's curriculum for technology education, and there's a new module put into the micros course for grade 7s, and there's a 28-hour module for communication technology. And you say, well, what does eggs have to do with communication technology? Well, the idea in communication technology is to talk about the design process and the systems model. The systems model is a concept whereby every system has 4 different parts. There's inputs, processes, outputs, and then feedback. And with that, the students were given a problem to come up with a design to solve the problem using 6 steps of the design process. And the 6 steps are identifying the need, gathering information and materials, developing alternative solutions, selecting the best solution, implementing the solution, and evaluating the solution. So what you saw today was implementing the solution, step number 5. They've done the first 4 steps, and now they're ready to do a write-up on their, what they call a design brief, where they send a letter to a company, which is my company, that wants the eggs delivered to Burgeo by air. The idea is that they had to come up with some device whereby the eggs could be dropped out of the airplane or the helicopter. And therefore, you see the sponge and the parachutes and the tape and the string and everything else.
Okay.
And as you can see, the first time around, 3 eggs broke. All 6 groups went back and revised their solution. And today, we're happy to report that all 6 eggs survived. So all groups got A's.
Hey, way to go.
Okay.
Okay. Is there anything else you'd like to add? Like, what's the next step in this project then?
Next step is a formal written report to me.
Okay.
They had to come up with a company name,
Okay.
and a company logo.
All right.
So then they'll send the reports back to me typed up with a design brief telling them, explaining what they did and so on. Very similar to a science experiment.
Okay. Okay. All right. Thanks a million.
Thank you.
Yep.
Not broken?
Yep.
Oh, excellent condition.
Ready? Ready? 2, 3, go.
Styrofoam, right? Yeah. Rubber bands? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah!
It's alive.
What's wrong with yours?
One, 2, 3. Go.
Thanks, stupid. Thanks, what?
All right, check it out.
It didn't break.
Wait. Okay. Wait. 2.
Okay, ready?
I'm ready.
See, show me. Okay, what you have in the box?
We had all that sponge,
Yeah.
and we had like a cutout, a hole, so now you can fit into it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ready?
Yeah.
1, 2, 3.
Oh, what's this red stuff? Turkey?
But take oil.
I don't think so.
We might need a knife. Glue these in.
It didn't break. Look, it didn't break. 40 takes, man. Scooter take. Look, it didn't break.
Take your eggs back and put it in the cart.
What did she
Was it
toy?
okay?
Much,
No, we
bro.
haven't figured it out yet.
We don't.
Can you get out?
That's yours?
Can't get it open.
My God, Alicia.
Holy cow.
Nice. Here.
Oh, man, dug out your food school.
Okay, don't lean over. Lean over.
No.
Hey, man's alive.
He made it.
Take it first, take
Yay, another live soldier.
Did anyone break it? No.
Oh, good job.
No. No, just needs to get out.
I was blood eggs. Anyone get
Oh,
eggs?
man.
Jake, you gotta give me eggs,
Look at
right?
your son, bro.
There you go. Break.
Hang on.
Jake.
Oh my God, what has she have done? Is it alive? We don't know yet.
Tiffany! I got any sitters? I have popcorn. Yeah. It's gonna take me that much. You're gonna have a lot of problems getting one.
I know, oh my god.
Eggs right stuck on teeth.
Chris?
Eggs not in the cake.
Oh my gosh. And guys, how about your other projects out there? Look.
Oh my god.
Oh my god. Nervous sewer cushion.
Well, I am sure.
What's that? What's that double?
What kind of chase?
The beer's over, bro.
Imagine rolled out.
God, did you bomb? What are you doing? Man, it was
I thought you turned the action over it.
oh my god, time gets open, we boss dog it.
I got it. Ow. Oh man.
Another twos and pieces left here.
Here, Tiffany, look.
What?
You got it? Can you get it? No. All right, here.
Whack it, I'm in the action.
Oh, come on.
No yolk?
No.
Perfect. 6 out of 6. Here you go, Tiffany.
Ours are
Thank you.
toys. Solder.
So,
Oh my
A's
god.
for everybody, right?
What was that, Mr. Vivian?
A's for everybody.
Hey, way to go. Stay tuned for more of this Week in Review coming up after this.
Okay, everyone, turn to page 74 in your text. Who knows the answer? Kelly. Kelly. Attention again. Now, I know you can do better than this.
Oh, pardon. Mr. Rossi. She just had a seizure.
You have just witnessed an absent seizure. Not all seizures are the same. For more information about epilepsy and how to access support in schools, call
1-866-EPILEPSY.
On Thursday of this week, we were invited to the Sea Cadets for a special presentation.
This is a little emotional for me. I care about the school very much. And I hope we carry on the traditions that you've set throughout these years. I'll always be proud of Bob Harper. I know I will be. And I do have to make a point that I will be here for your ACR. I would not miss that. Okay? We'll be here. I have to move on. It's a family decision. Not because I want to leave the Sea Cadet Corps, because it's one of the high points since I've been here, Virgil, as being a part of this Corps. This Corps will always be a part of me. I'll take Bob Hart with me wherever I go. And I hope you do the same when you move on. And you hold this pride in your heart the way that I do. Shortly now, myself and Mr. Boyle will sit down. I'll hand command of the Sea Cadet Corps over to him. take the dais as your new CO. He'll take the salute. So I just want to say before I go, thank you. It's been a blast. Good luck to everybody that's going to camp this summer. And I'll see you in May. And I'm sure you'll put on a fantastic show as you've always done. Thank you. Officers that were on my staff for the past 3 years. Couldn't ask for better people. It's amazing. Thank you again. Mr. Poole, would you like to join me? Relax now. Just got a couple of presentations that the Lions wanted to make before we carry on. And also, this is a little informal here, but I just wanted to let you know that I received a plaque too recently. Remember our exchange we had in Thanksgiving weekend where Halifax came down to visit us? Well, they just sent us a plaque. It's a Navy League plaque, and it reads, ICE 2001 visit, ICE representing Interprovincial Cadet Exchange 2001 visit, 6 to 8 October, presented to 157 Bob Harlett with many thanks. Number 1, RCSCC Nelson, Halifax.
The first plaque we have here is to present it to Commanding Officer Mr. Jeff Cody, 1999, 2002, for your outstanding and dedicated service shown to the Burger Cadet Corps, RCSCC, Bob Barton, 157. Our next one is to Tracy Qualley, Training Officer, 1999, 2002, for your outstanding and dedicated service shown to the Burger Cadet Corps, RCSCC, Bob Barton, 157. Our next one is going to Mr. Ron Caldwell. Executive Officer, 1999, 2002, for your outstanding and dedicated service shown to the Burgess Secret Corps, RCSCC, Barbara, 457. And the next one, Representative Brian Sims. Supply Officer, 2001-2002, for your outstanding and dedicated service shown to the Burgess Secret Corps, RCSCC, Bob Barton Corps, 157. I'd like to thank all of the officers and you cadets for your outstanding performance you've shown our community. Thank you all.
Right now?
Before we go on.
Okay.
Yes, sir. Before we go. First one.
Okay. Okay.
The last 3 years, both Mr. Posey and Mrs. Posey have done a lot for our poor, and if someone in the community took it on themselves to be asked to write a poem. This is what it says. When the seas have been rough, when the blue glass does gleam, you've been our fearless leader, you've managed our team. You've taken on our problems and made them your own. When we thought we were unable, your guidance we were shown. We have sailed the rough seas time and again, with you by our side, our captain, our friend. Now comes the time we know you must part, but always remember you remain in our heart. The heart of the poor, the heart of our team. When we think of your leadership, our ocean will gleam. Farewell, Mr. Quilty. Goodbye and so long. Never forget us, because your leadership lives on. With a warm word for everyone and a smile to melt our hearts. You made our seas much smoother. You gave our day a warm start. You graced us with your beauty. You made our port complete. You're the wind in our sail. You're the foundation under our feet. We miss you at sunset when our port comes to end. Our ocean will never be as smooth without Mrs. Quilty, our officer out there.
Mayor Han is here this evening with the council report.
Good evening. Burgeo Town Council report for Wednesday, March the 20th, year 2002. Council held its regular meeting. There were 6 members in attendance. The meeting convened at 7 p.m. and it was after 10:30 before the meeting adjourned. So it was making for a long meeting. The first hour of our meeting was meeting with the delegation from the REC committee. They met with council and answered some of brought council up to speed on where they're going with regard to trying to provide some recreational facilities for Burgeo. And councils had a chance to ask questions and try to become a little more educated into which way they would move and so on in support of this committee. As I say, the delegation met with us for an hour, and the committee is to be commended for their efforts and so on that they're doing to try bring this about in Burgeo, especially at this time, you know, when things are not looking good for this town. However, council has certain guidelines to follow, and as before it commits the town to something, it's got to be quite clear in knowing where it goes, because council have always got to be cognizant of the fact that when all else fails, it seems as if the buck stops on the council table. However, what the Rec Commission has concluded that the way they seem as if they're going to move is that they would like to put a building over the present hockey rink, and there will be no artificial ice there, and hopefully they hope to turn it into some kind of a facility that will not be a burden to the town, will be very low cost. In fact, they're looking at a building that to purchase, you know, this is just preliminary figures, $127,000. So, you know, if you factor in the construction cost and things which would not come with that building, you're probably looking at a capital cost expenditure of maybe $250,000. The building would be, of course, still used for hockey, but for other use. However, I would leave anything there up to the committee if at such time they would like to inform the town just which way they are going. But given the information that council has at this time, and council know that they have all the information that the committee can supply them at this time, there was a motion, of course, there was much discussion on it again after the delegation departed. And the position on council is at this time, and trying to stay within the guidelines according to the plebiscite, which was held in Burgeo in the year 2001. It was supported by council unanimously in a motion that council is willing to support the Hockey Roof Rink Committee in its efforts to erect a roof over the existing hockey rink, and that the funds raised by the previous Recreation Commission will be made available for this project. The ownership of the property will be dealt with at a later date. Therefore, we feel that there is some things that have got to be worked out. However, they're not insurmountable, and we feel that that we can come to some resolution on this thing whereby eventually the money which you gave, which is $125,000, somewhere in that amount, council will certainly be put everything that it has to access any other grants from government for the promotion of this facility. So that's the situation with regard to recreation, and hopefully that eventually something will come from this, from the money which you gave some years ago, and you will eventually see something for it, and at the same time it will not become a noose around the necks of the people of Burgeo, and you can be assured that the council will take every step it possibly can to make sure that you, the people, will not be on the hook for something which will be a drag on the community, but instead will be an asset, and an asset which the town can be proud of. Water treatment. The engineering firm which was supposed to have been here for last night's meeting, there's been a serious sickness in Mr. Don DeCaesar's family. I believe it's in Nova Scotia, and they just couldn't make the meeting last night. However, council was given a tentative schedule of how the company, Brooks Construction, see the construction beginning and ending, and as it progresses, what will be done with regard to the buildings and the dam site and so on. Anyway, the tentative start-up date is the 21st of May. That's when they hope to turn the first sod, and the tentative completion date is August the 4th. So, you know, it's May, June, July, August. We're only talking a 4-month project there anyway. With regard to phase 2, Council have received a letter from Municipal Affairs confirming that beyond a word of a doubt that they are committed to Phase 2 and that while they cannot give exact details when contracts will be called for or tenders will be called for and so on, beyond a word of a doubt that this project will be going ahead. And I suppose we've got to take in mind that Phase 2 will be mainly the acquiring of equipment and installing it in the building which will be built in Phase 1. So therefore, weather will not be a factor. Also, in the line of water, the town was in receipt of the water quality report for the town of Burgeo for the year 2001. This report is quite interesting. It's at the town hall. I guess it's 4 or 5 or 6 pages long. But in that is there's a complete analysis of your water. It gives you what the acceptable standards are and what Burgeo's standards are. So, you know, if you've got any concern with regard to arsenic, lead, THMs, and so on, the full report is at the council office. The council will not be able to photocopy this for every resident of Burgeo. However, if you would like to drop by and get the report and look at it for your own interest, then by all means drop by the council office and take an interest in the water which you're drinking, because by and large, even though our water does look terrible, you know, it's not all that bad. And once it gets cleaned up a little bit and the color gets took out of it and that, you'll probably have as good a water system as there is in Canada. Regarding the waste management, SGE Engineering of Corner Brook has been awarded the contract to go ahead and do a study into the options which the communities of Francois, Grey River, Ramey, and Burgeo can look at in which way we dispose of our waste. Now, you know, they will come back in, I believe it's 6 or 8 weeks from now, and make some recommendations or list out some options that our communities will have to look at. And it is quite possible that when it's all done, said and done, that we'll have to continue on with the present method we're using right now. There's been some talk, you know, about a rest stop entering the Burgeo Road, and council did make application and was very disappointed when it didn't get approval. However, through Mr. Parsons and the provincial government, $25,000 have been made available, what we call I guess a make-work project for the town of Burgeo. So with that in mind, what council along with BDDB is considering doing is to build a portable rest stop, and this would be built right here in Burgeo, and it would be of such that it could be screwed together, carried up to the Burgeo turnoff in the spring, and while it's being occupied and used, it would remain there, and then in the fall could be dismantled and brought back to Burgeo for security purposes and so on. So that's something council's looking at, and hopefully that something can eventually come out of this so that we can entice and bring people down to Burgeo and increase our tourism. Now comes the next one, which was practically as long as the Recreation Commission one, with the fish plant. And I'm sure everybody in Burgeo was disappointed. I know council was very disappointed, even though, you know, we weren't there really expecting the most. I guess most of us was on a scale to 1 to 10 was a 3 or a 5 or somewhere in between there that it might come about. But it was still disappointing when it was announced that, you know, once again Burgeo had struck out and there was nothing for us. Council has got a lot of concerns and unanswered questions in our minds as to, you know, just what did happen there, and we do feel that the local committee here in Burgeo is not to be faulted. I think the committee did what they were asked to do. I think they followed the steps, and in other words, they passed goal and collected $200 and so on. But something is just, sometimes we're adding up and one is not making two. And in that regard, we have requested a meeting with Mr. Parsons when he comes to Burgeo on Friday. And we're going to try to get some answers to some of our questions. We have no reason to feel that Mr. Parsons didn't put his best foot forward and do the best that he could. I guess it's all, maybe sometimes it all boils down to this thing called politics, and just how sincere and how truthful it all works out. You know, is it for sometimes for the better of the town, or is it for the better of the political parties and so on? It's all questions, you know. Everything is speculation, and really we haven't got the answers that we would like to have. And having said that, you know, I guess we've got to look at our town and ask ourselves the question, where to from here? You know, we can be an optimist and say, oh, everything is going to work out fine and dandy. Then we can be a pessimist and say nothing is going to work out. But I guess somewhere between a pessimist and an optimist is a realist. And I guess that's, reality has got to be where we look at our town today and some way try to impress upon the powers to be, you know, that there's got to be a place for us somewhere. And in that regard, still on the fishery, the Shrimp Advisory Committee is meeting in St. John's on the 27th and the 28th of March. And we were informed of this, and Councillor George Reid will be, he took out the proposal which we made in Ottawa in the year 2001. And George will be going to St. John's and presenting the same policy, the same proposal, to see if we can access some shrimp. Now, what we're going to do with the shrimp after we get it, I guess is something like the dog when he catches the car. We'll have to make our minds up then. But in any event, we're still turning one more page and seeing what's going to happen there. You've heard quite a bit of discussion on the government shed and so on. Well, the shed is still not back into the hands of the Burgeo Town Council. Hopefully it will come about sometime. There's been many requests with regard to do with the shed and so on, but the consensus of council was last night that they're really not going to look at anything at the present time. They want to keep their options open, and should the shed come back to council, you can be sure that the whichever options are on the table at the time for us to look at, we will certainly decide on what we feel is the best for the town of Burgeo. Tidy Towns, it was agreed that Burgeo would participate in this again. Hopefully one of these days we will get 5 pitcher plants. 5 pitcher plants is the winner. Last year we got 4. We've got different things going to happen again this year in Burgeo. Our library is going to be an not our library, our museum is going to give us a little uplift and a new look that's going to take on. We're going to have a new Welcome to Burgeo sign. We're going to have a new sign at the museum. We're going to have many, many more garbage containers placed all around town. I believe it's, I don't know if it's 26 or 32 new containers we've got. So we're going to try once more and see if we can go from 4 pitcher plants to 5 pitcher plants and be a provincial winner. On April the 13th, the Newfoundland Labrador Federation of Municipalities is holding a workshop in Gander. And this workshop is to look at ways which municipal councils raise money. Right now, there's nothing, only the property tax that is available to your town to raise money, and you know, this is not good enough for small rural areas especially. So what it's going to be is a brainstorming session to see in different ways, and one which has been considered before and which will be looked at again. The government collects taxes on gasoline, liquor, and cigarettes within quite a few municipalities. However, it doesn't turn any of the money back to the municipality. Well, the municipalities feels that a couple of those cents, which they do collect per liter and so on, should be turned back to the municipality. Now, we're not saying we're asking them to increase the tax by a couple of more cents, because that would only be passing on another tax to you. But what we're saying is that from the taxes they get, why not turn back a couple of cents back to the municipalities? Because along with the highways which your car is used on, which the government is responsible for, vehicles are also used on the local roads around your municipality. So why shouldn't we have some access to that money? So therefore, I have been invited to represent southwestern Newfoundland at that workshop on April the 13th, and I will be taking part there. And I would throw this out to every person in Burgeo, that between now and April the 13th, if you have some thoughts on which way, a better way, or something that government should be upping your municipality and would not increase a burden on you, then pass it on to me, because then I will be able to pass it on to the proper place on April 13th. Invoices in the amount of $31,170.58 was approved for payment. And I suppose after having a sort of a bad news report to a certain extent this evening, something on a lighter note I would like to pass on to you. I'm sure some of you in Burgeo can remember Mr. Gordon Snow. He once worked there in Burgeo as a fish inspection officer. Well, Gordon is retired and has been living in Ottawa for some years now. And it was council had an offer from him. Gordon runs a consulting business around Ottawa at the present time. It's called Fisheries Services Incorporated. And he wrote me a letter shortly after my appearance to the Standing Committee on Fisheries and Oceans. And he says, it looks as if you are still doing your utmost to promote the cause for Burgeo and obtain some badly needed employment. I'm not going to go into the rest of the letter. However, he did say, my main reason for writing is to offer help. If you feel there is some way to assist in the efforts by you and the town to develop opportunities, potential assistance could include working with Bill Matthews here in Ottawa, meeting with DFO people here on your behalf, preparing position papers, and doing research. Gordon has done work with British Columbia, even to the East Coast. And he finishes up by saying, there will be no charge for my efforts. And he underlines that. So, you know, it's kind of nice to see that someone who did spend some years in Burgeo has still got an interest here and is willing to put their efforts with the Burgeo Town Council to see if we can develop our town, and something for which probably thousands of dollars, if some other town was using this man, has been offered to the town of Burgeo free. So, you know, the town will certainly be acknowledging this. However, the big stumbling block is what do we ask him to do, because we're starting to run out of ideas. Anyway, that's the Burgeo Town Council report for this evening, and I guess I could pass on right now a happy Easter to everyone. Good evening.
On Friday of this week, our MHA, the Honourable Calvin Parsons, dropped by our studio for an interview.
Today in our studio we have with us our MHA, Calvin Parsons. Welcome, Mr. Parsons.
Good to be here.
Good to have you again. And I understand you had a very busy day.
Fairly busy. I got here this morning about 10:30. We met with council at 10:30. Joanne Clark is with me, my executive assistant. And following that, we met with the Fishermen's Committee this morning. And following that, we just finished up a meeting with the FFAW plant union. So it's been quite a busy day.
And I'm assuming the meeting that you had with the plant workers is about the plant and the fact that the seal tannery is no longer for us.
Yes, well, let me go back and give some context here on the tannery piece, because I guess it was deliberately low profile on the plant, the tannery piece from day one, because we've had so many examples here over the past number of years where you start to do something and people quite rightly get their expectations up, and then if it doesn't come to fruition, you end up with a lot of disappointment again. I was asked on Monday by Ray Frew on CBC Radio Monday morning. He called to discussing other matters, and in the course of that conversation he asked me about the tannery, and I said my thoughts on it were that the tannery would not be going to Burgeo. And he asked me why I felt that way, and I gave him my explanation, and I'd like to give it to the people of Burgeo as well. This started back in October when Bill Barry asked a group of people, including myself, representatives of council, BDDB, Fishermen's Union, and so on, to come to Curling for a meeting on the possibility of a tannery for seals for Burgeo. At that time in October, Mr. Barry outlined what he'd like to do, which was basically bring seals here and do the tanning on them like he's doing in Catalina. At the time, I said to him following that meeting, well, look, rather than having things just verbal between us at a meeting, why don't you put in writing what it is exactly you want to do and what are the conditions that you need in order to do it. So he wrote a letter to government. He had 4 conditions in it at that time. One was he would have to straighten out the situation involving his Falcon partners, which are Daly and Quinlan's. And that was number 1. Number 2, he wanted to have a monopoly on seal tanning licenses in the province, so that he would have the only license. If he set up a tannery, there would be only one license besides the one that he already has in Catalina, which would be here in Burgeo. Thirdly, he wanted to have a permission to use his own boats to go get the seals, or else engage his fishermen to go get the seals himself. And the 4th condition was that he wanted a regulation in the province requiring that all seals be processed there in the province. Because his argument was that as long as we allowed processors to take it out of the country or out of the province, that there was no guarantee that the resource would stay here to be done. Currently, for example, Barry is the only person who is taking a seal pelt right to its final garment stage. There's about 67 different steps from the time you get the seal to the time when it's ready to be taken by a furrier and turned into some kind of garment. Carino is only doing about 20-25 steps of that 67-step process. They're then shipping it to Norway, Bergen, where they finish it up in their plants. So Mr. Barry's argument was that if you require Reber, and by the way, Reber, I'll use the names here just to give you some history. Carino is the name of the company that operates the plant at Dildo, South Dildo. Carino is owned by the Reber family out of Norway, and the principal is a fellow by the name of Paul Christian Reber. So when I say Dildo, Reber, or Carino, I'm talking about the same group here. So currently, Reber only takes theirs to about 25 steps of the way. So Barry was saying, look, make a regulation, require that the government insist upon all processing be done here, and therefore somebody's got to do it here in the province, therefore we need another tannery, therefore we need more employment, and if that comes to be, I would do it in Burgeo. So that's where we started from. So we assessed, when he gave us that letter, first of all, on the plant thing and his partners, that's no concern of any government. That's between him and his partners, how he irons that out. Secondly, on the issue of going to get the seals in his own boats, that's not a provincial issue. It's up to him. It's up to the federal government who's allowed to fish, whether it be codfish or seals or anything else. It's up to the federal government, not the provincial government, who can actually go catch the seals. So that wasn't a concern for the provincial government. The issue of the monopoly just wasn't on. I mean, in our society, the way you work, you cannot give anybody a monopoly for a number of reasons. If Barry or anyone has a monopoly, of course, they can control the pricing on the seals, which was a big issue when it came to the sealers themselves, because they didn't want to be subject to Bill Barry or anyone else dictating what the price might be for their pelts. And last year we had the best price on pelts in numbers of years, in decades actually. The price of a pelt was going for anywhere from $31 to $36 a pelt last year. So that was a concern, but we could have got around that one in the sense of the pricing, because we could have used the final offer selection process, whereby, same as they do on crab and shrimp, the processor would put in a price, the fisherman would put in a price, and an arbitrator would decide what the price should be. So we could have got around the pricing piece of it. But when you give anyone a monopoly, you got to consider who the other players are in the industry. We have, besides Reber and besides Barry, we have Kubota, which does seals in the province to a certain stage. We have the Northeast Sealers Association, which does this to a certain stage. So when you go making a law, obviously, if you're going to shut anyone down out of business, they're going to come back to government looking for compensation. And you're talking millions and millions of dollars if you try to give anyone a monopoly. So I went back to Mr. Barry and said, look, it's not on in terms of giving you the only exclusive license for Burgeo and for nowhere else in the province, because there are these other players in the industry. On the regulation piece, we said, yeah, government is prepared to look at regulating so that at least we insist upon it being done here in our province, whether it's Barry, Dildo, Kubota, or Northeast. We're prepared to look at that. And Barry said, well, maybe I can do a partnership with Mr. Reber. So rather than me competing against him and Dildo, and me trying to do something in Burgeo, maybe I get together and we talk with him and we might be able to work something out. I.e., he could use his Catalina one as he's doing, and if he could have worked a deal with Reber, we could have let Dildo do the first stages like they're doing and then ship it down to Burgeo for finishing. And he told us you'd need about 100,000 pelts to make a plant viable. You can't do it on anything less than that. He's currently doing 100,000 in Catalina right now. So he said he needed that many pelts. The quota last year, for example, was 270,000. He had 105 of those. Reber had about 95,000. And the balance went to Kubota and Northeast, who are much smaller players in the field. 40,000 actually were still left in the water last year and weren't taken, so they didn't take the full 70. They actually took about 240 of that quota. So I said, well, if you want, we can try to arrange a meeting with Mr. Reber if you can do a partnership and make it work in Burgeo that way. So that meeting, it took 60-odd days to get that arranged, and we held that meeting in St. John's on January 24th. Reber was present, Bill Barry was present, myself, and Jerry Reed was present to facilitate the deal and see if there was anything we could do to help it along. It became quite obvious after 10 minutes of the discussion that these two guys are not going to do business together under any circumstances. They are bitter competitors, and there's no way that Reber was prepared to get into bed with Bill Barry, and Bill Barry, I guess for his own reasons, thought it might be a good deal, but Reber said, no, I'm not doing anything with Bill Barry. I'm a big player in the industry myself, and whatever I got to do, I'll do, but I can do it without Bill Barry. So that put that off the table in January. So then Jerry Reed still let both companies know that, look, we're going to be looking at full processing here anyway, so make up your minds what you're going to do, both of you, because this is where we're headed to with regulation and to do full processing. Mr. Reber made what I thought was a very foolish statement and said, well, if you don't regulate, I will put a tannery in Dildo. But if you do regulate, I will not put a tannery in Dildo. Now, Mr. Reber has already got, I would suggest, a facility in Dildo that's worth anywhere from $5 to $6 million. It's quite an impressive setup that he has there. I couldn't understand why Reber would come here voluntarily, but not come here if he's forced to come here by regulation. And if he intended to do it, why would the regulation bother him anyway? But that was his position. So once that position was made known, Mr. Barry, meanwhile, came back as well and said, well, if Reber's going to do it in Dildo, I'm not going to go to Burgeo because I'm in Catalina. If he goes to Dildo, there's no room in the province for a third one. That was Mr. Barry's comment. So Jerry Reed went back to Reber and said, you've told us that you're going to do this in Dildo. We're going to insist that it be done in the province anyway. Would you mind telling us in writing that you're going to do it in Dildo? Anyway, at least tell us and give us a written commitment, for what that's worth. We've seen what the worth of some commitments are. We had that in the FPI very recently. So Reed has written to Reber telling him, put it in writing that you're going to go to Dildo, but I'm telling you up front that we're going to regulate anyway. And come January the 1st, 2003, there's not going to be any more unprocessed pelts leaving this province. So Barry Reed wanted to get that across to Reber quite forcefully. And Barry knows that as well. In fact, all seal processors in the province got that message from Jerry Reed that come January the 1st this year, 2003, that's what's going to happen. Now, some people are saying, why don't you do it today, regulate today, rather than January the 1st, 2003? The fact of the matter is, no matter who does it, it takes time to go from where you are now to setting up a facility to get into the tanning. You got to bring in equipment, you got to get staff, you got to get your staff trained to do it. In fact, the seal hunt is just starting now at this time, so it takes some time, lead time to get in to do it. And we don't know, maybe Kubota wants to get into it, maybe Northeast wants to get into it, because they're all going to have to play by the same rules now. So that's where it stood. And when I was doing an interview with Ray Frew on Monday and he got into the tannery piece, I told him exactly what my thoughts were, and that is, if Mr. Reber is going to go to Dildo, and if Bill Barry has one in Catalina, and if both of them are telling us that the province can only sustain 2 tanneries, that does not look good for Burgeo. And that's where my comments came from. And again, I can only be truthful as to how I understand it. There's nothing right now preventing Bill Barry or anyone else from setting up a seal tannery in Burgeo. If he wants to go ahead and put his money where his mouth is to back up the proposition, he can do that. There's nothing stopping him. He knows now that the province is going to have full processing. But Mr. Barry is not prepared to do that unless he knows that Reber is not going to do it. And government has no control over that. We cannot tell Mr. Reber that you're not going to put a tannery here. We're not prepared to do that. That's getting into the monopoly again. And yes, you try to do something to help Burgeo, but you can't hurt some other community to help Burgeo. And basically that's what's being asked. And if Barry is a businessman who wants access to the pelts, he's got that now. Well, first of all, even without a regulation, either one of these companies can buy from the fishermen at the head of the wharf. Who gets the pelts depends on what they're prepared to pay for them. It's like any business. If Seafreeze comes here and buys codfish and Bill Barry wants to buy codfish, they compete with those fishermen to see who pays the best price to who gets the fish. And the same thing happens in the sealing industry. What Bill wanted to do was to get all the product here in the province by way of regulation, thinking, I guess, that Reber would not go ahead and expand in Dildo. And if that happened, then he could easily come to Burgeo. But he can still come to Burgeo if he wants to come here.
So it's like, I listened to your broadcast, the news broadcast too, and along with other people, I felt the same way. You were saying that Burgeo wasn't going to get the seal tannery. Now, however, when I returned to work on Wednesday, I was out of town, that somebody was telling me Mr. Reed was on the TV saying that, no, it's not. It's not a dead issue. So really, it's between the two companies. It doesn't have anything to do with quotas. If those two gentlemen decide that there's only room enough for 2 tanneries in Newfoundland, Catalina got one and Dildo's going to have the other one, Burgeo still doesn't have anything. Absolutely. I mean, Bill Barry and Mr. Reber, they're businessmen who are in the seal tanning business. Yeah. If they want to set up another tannery here, either one of them can go ahead and do it. What we're doing is leveling the playing field for all parties so that we know we're going to keep the product within the province. Now, which one of these businessmen are going to move first and put a tannery? And Mr. Barry is saying, I'm not going to move unless I know Mr. Reber is not going to move. And we have no control over that as a government. Now, you talk about who wins and loses out of this. I mean, there's one obvious loser in the sense that Burgeo is not going to get a tannery. But if you go back to where this all started in October and where it came from, who wanted to win out of this game to start with? And who has been the winners? The winner obviously will be the people of Dildo if they end up getting a tannery on top of what they have. They've won. And also we know that the province wins because instead of having these pelts processed in Norway, whatever gets done now, an additional, will come from Newfoundland workers rather than Norwegian workers. So that's a win for the province, but it doesn't put any bread on the tables in Burgeo. But another winner here, and I think this is a point that's maybe escaped, and Bill Barry pointed this out in a letter to Jerry Reed, that Reber has to refurbish their plant in Bergen, Norway, because it's dilapidated. They have problems getting workers. They're currently staffed mostly by Vietnamese who are come in by the busload, because the people in Norway don't work in the sealing industry. Their immigrants are working in their sealing industry. Norway has a very high labor market
compared even to Newfoundland. The price that they pay for labor is very high. So the cost of your labor becomes a factor to the business people. Mr. Reber apparently is going to invest in a tannery. We suspect that he was not going to invest in Norway because that's where he has problems with workers and problems with wages. The issue was, where was he going to come to? Was he going to come to Dildo, or was he going to go to China? And Mr. Barry suggested to us, to Minister Reed, that he thought Reber was going to go to China. Now, if Mr. Reber goes to China and builds a tannery, instead of paying $10 an hour for labor, like you would say in Newfoundland, and which Barry is paying, say, in Catalina, Mr. Reber's going to get his labor for about $10 a week instead of $10 an hour. And if Mr. Reber put his plant in China and got that kind of low wages, obviously when it comes time to sell his product in the market, Mr. Reber is in a much better position than Mr. Barry when it comes to selling your finished product. So Mr. Barry, no doubt, being a businessman, realized that Reber going to China was very detrimental to him in Catalina, because Virgil's out of the question. If Reber goes to China with a plant, Bill Barry's plant in Catalina could suffer the consequences, because where are they going to sell their product then if they're competing against a guy who's got $10 a week labor? So by bringing in the regulation, the other thing that comes about is this is going to force Mr. Reber to put his plant in Dildo rather than China. By Mr. Reber making his investment in Dildo, at least Bill Barry now still has his labor rates on the same level as Reber's going to have in Dildo. So Barry gains for his plant in Catalina. Now, I'm not suggesting that that's bad. That's playing a businessman's game. He doesn't want to compete with Reber over in China, and this is going to end up with him competing with Mr. Reber on the same surf and same turf at the same wage rates. So that's a win for Catalina. So the winners here were Catalina. There was a winner in Dildo if they put the plant there. And the province wins overall because we're maximizing the benefits of our sealing industry. The losers, of course, here is because it's not going to come to Burgeo. So there's a lot of functions to this, and mixed up in all of this, the bottom line is, and the price of pelts, by the way, has gone from $36 going to $55 a pelt this year. So it's becoming a very lucrative industry. And the question is, who's prepared to put their money where their mouth is? Like, we don't know even today, and that's where Jerry Reed is coming from when he says he doesn't know if it's a dead issue, because we don't know, even though Reber says they're going to go to Dildo, we don't know. What if Mr. Reber doesn't go to Dildo in 2002, in 2003? We know that after January 1st, Mr. Reber's not taking anything out of here unprocessed. But what if he does still? What if he says, okay, that's fine with me,
So
I'm not going to build? We're still left with Bill Barry at some point in time having to make a decision whether he's going to invest in Burgeo.
So it really is not an issue. It's still, there's still a ray of hope there that.
Well, it's a very dim ray, and that's why I came to my conclusions.
Should we say in Burgeo, well, just toss that one up for
well,
that's over and done with?
I think we had to be realist there, and I don't believe in misleading people and misguiding people. I mean, I was asked my opinion, and my opinion is, after listening to Mr. Reber, after listening to Mr. Barry, my conclusion is that if there's going to be a tannery, I think Mr. Reber will go to Dildo, because I don't think he's going to want to lose the $5-6 million he's got invested there. I think he is heavily dependent upon the Newfoundland seals in order to help out his fur industry. If he's going to do that, I don't think Bill Barry's going to move. And if Bill Barry doesn't move, that's why I think we have a very limited, very, very small ray of hope of seeing anything done in Burgeo. Because these guys are the business people who are going to play it to their best business interest.
And that's what it is, basically, is a game between businessmen.
Correct. And if Mr. Reber says, look, I'm not going to stay involved in the sealing industry, we don't know that. Reber, for example, and Carino, that is only like 2.7% of his overall business interest. The Reber company is into transworld shipment and shipbuilding and this kind of stuff, banking, rental properties. I mean, they own properties here, for example, in downtown St. John's. So the sealing industry is a very small piece of Reber's business. He's only interested in it now, apparently, because it was his great-grandfather who started it, and he'd like to continue doing it. And besides, he's making some money at it. But if he decides that he's out of this because he's not prepared to invest his money, well, we're still left with the possibility that somebody could build a tannery. But I don't believe in putting people up with expectations up there where something may not come of this. It's in their hands now, and it's up to one of these businessmen to make a move.
Okay, so we're still with if they do this, or what if they do this. So basically,
it's not in the control.
It's a very, not even a...
The playing field has been leveled. The province is going to go to a full processing stage in the province, and it's up to the players in the industry now to decide if they're going to partake and where they're going to partake, and that's where it stands. You know, there's possibilities. For example, we don't know how much the market can bear in terms of the furs. Mr. Barry tells us that we can only handle in the international seal fur market about 200,000 pelts a year. Because if it could handle more, well, I mean, we got 270,000. We're not too far off the mark. If it takes 100,000 a year to sustain a seal tannery, if he's got 100 now for Catalina, and Reber's got 100 for Dildo, there's 70,000 extra out there. And I mean, with a bit of push with the federal government, you should get the extra seal. We only need 30,000 extra, and there's another 100,000 for third place. But that doesn't work if both of these people tell you that a third one is no good.
Well, it's all the information that you gave us, and I'm just talking about the two companies. Obviously, it's a very complicated, and there's a lot of factors into it. So, putting the tannery, seal tannery aside, where do we go? Burgeo, where does that leave us right now?
Well, I just admit again, we had the redfish in 3O as an issue, and I discussed all these issues with the union this afternoon, because they want to know the same thing. Where do they go? When I heard about the redfish possibly going to cancel from 3O about 3 weeks ago, I made my position known to Mr. Tebow and to Max Short, who's a big player here in the DFO angles, that, look, this is totally inappropriate, number one, to be taking anything out of our waters, which are adjacent to Newfoundland, like they did back in the shrimp thing in PEI, and be talking about giving it to cancel. I mean, Burgeo is the prime place where they took redfish already from Burgeo, and some of it's up in Port aux Basques, which is also in my district, and some of it's in Nova Scotia. But that don't make it right. It was destined for Burgeo and should have been in Burgeo. And here we're talking about possibly doing it again for cancel. I told Max Short, and I told Jerry Reed told Tebow, that even though we don't want to see anything come out of Newfoundland waters, we might be able to live with it if you're going to give cancel redfish, if you could give us some outside 200-mile crab. Because at least then Newfoundland could say you made a trade-off for one community for the other. That didn't happen. Mr. Tebow decided last Friday that he didn't want to touch this. But that was the proposal we put forward. As much as we don't want to give anything out of our resources to anybody outside of Newfoundland, we would, as a province, support the idea of giving the redfish to cancel, but only if you were prepared to give crab to Burgeo. That didn't come to be. Now, I don't know if that idea is off the table. I know that the crowd in Cancel and the mayor and all the politicians in Nova Scotia are lobbying Mr. Tebow strenuously. They got their bus loads of people, apparently, the same as we had down in the Battery a couple of years ago, trying to get Mr. Tebow to change his mind. Jerry Reed, the Minister of Fisheries, is in PEI today as we speak with Minister Tebow again, and I know he's promoting that idea again. I know that Bill Matthews has raised the idea with Tebow. I know that I raised the idea with Max Short. So whether anything comes of that or not, who knows? All we can do is keep pushing it. The bottom line here is in Burgeo, I mean, we've got to get a resource. We can create all the level playing fields we want in the province, and the province is prepared to do that. But once you got a level playing field, you got to have some resource to put through the plant. And that's the old issue we've been fighting on for the last number of years. What is the resource? Is it going to be a seal? Is it going to be a shrimp? Is it going to be a crab? And that's what we've been fighting. And we thought we had it in '99, of course, but then they cut the quota on us again. Which leads me to my next point, which I raised with the local union of the FFAW. I mean, if I see any weakness in the support for what we need done here in Burgeo, it's from the provincial executive of the FFAW. I mean, I have never missed a meeting. In fact, I've engineered most of the meetings that come about when it comes to provincially, federally, or whatever. Haven't missed one, been pushing strenuously. Alistair Han, God bless him, we disagree on a lot of things, as we should from time to time. But I mean, there's no other better spokesperson for Burgeo. And you know, sometimes Alistair gets bitter too over when these types of things happens, and he makes statements too that that after, you know, I wish he didn't make some of them, but I can see where he's coming from. It's a frustration level, but he is the best messenger that we could have in terms of promoting Burgeo. He keeps it in the news constantly. He's appearing before the Federal Fisheries Committee. He's on the CBCs. He's on the open lines. He's on the Fisherman's Broadcast. And we do the same thing, and we exert our influences. But the one that I see is missing, the big, powerful player in all of this, who I think could be exerting a bigger influence, is the provincial executive of the FFAW, Mr. McCurdy and Mr. Anstey. Now maybe there's no solutions, but there seems to be a void to me where they're missing, at least when it comes to being there every step of the way, supporting us. I mean, the local unions are doing their best, and the local unions through Owen Noseworthy, Owen Marsden and the group, you know, they approach me and ask me what I'm doing. They approach Bill Matthews and ask what they're doing. They approach the council and say, what are you doing? And even though those people are doing something, they should also be forcing it upon their own provincial executive to say, you guys are very powerful influences when it comes to where quotas go in this country. I mean, some would suggest that the FFAW, not DFO, controls the fishery in this province. And this is not to take a kick at Anstey or McCurdy, but they have to come to the table in a more forceful way for Burgeo. And if there's anything that's missing right now in terms of public pressure, that's where it's missing. And that's the message that I delivered to them this afternoon. The other option that we got to do is, I mean, Mr. Barry, for example, is not going to open that plant until he gets a resource, whether it be crab or whatever that he gets. We tried for shrimp, and that's coming up again, by the way, next Wednesday in St. John's. There's another panel. I will be making a presentation there as well, same as we did in Ottawa last April, to no avail. But we're going to do it again. If you don't go, they'll say you're not interested enough to show up. So we're certainly not going to give them that excuse to say, well, we don't have to consider Burgeo because they didn't even show up to talk about it. So I'll be there next Wednesday to do that again to the committee that's meeting in there. The other piece we have here, and to date, Mr. Barry has not been prepared to process the ground fish that's coming ashore here. Like, we have somewhere between 2 to 3 million pounds a year that the local fishermen here catch. It gets trucked out of town by people like Seacrest or Barry's or King's Fisheries, and a host of different processors have come in over the years to take it out, basically, because Mr. Barry feels that is not of a sufficient quantity to justify opening the plant. And he's probably right in the sense of he's got a massive plant over there, and to start it up for 2 to 3 million pounds, he feels is not even worth the while to do that. I, on the other hand, feel that whatever's coming ashore here on our docks should at least be processed here. It may not mean a lot of jobs, but if it's fish that comes ashore in Burgeo, it should not be processed anywhere else. It should be processed here in Burgeo by someone. Some processors have expressed an interest in doing that. The issue, of course, then becomes, how do we get a license in order to allow that person to process here? That comes back to the provincial government again, because the provincial government issues the licenses for processing. So I advised the group again today. I have the assurances of Minister Reid that we can access a processing license to do that. So that's out of the way now. So we can access a license to process the fish that's coming over the wharf in Burgeo here. It might not be a big deal, but God knows what it could turn into. But we got to start somewhere in at least processing what we do have. And there's a number of processors who are looked at wanting to do it, Seacrest being one of them. I know King's Fisheries and Burnt Islands expressed an interest. And I'm sure once other processors in the province know that there's a license available here to do it, they'll probably be interested as well. Because anybody who does the processing, ultimately there's a dollar in it to be made by them too. So we're pushing along with that angle. And it comes down, I guess, to there's municipal, federal, provincial responsibilities and who can do what. And sometimes people get the wires crossed as to who's supposed to be or who can do what. As a province, when it comes to regulation, we're prepared to do that. When it comes to giving a processing license, we can get the processing license. When it comes to getting a quota, that's not we can't do that. We can exert influence to try to get it from the feds, but it's ultimately got to be a federal decision as to who's going to get the quotas and what quotas for what species.
It was a very difficult task, and the more you're talking, the more issues that come up, and more questions that are raised, and there's no easy solutions to it. And someone at home sitting in their living room right now watching this is saying, like, what is the point? We've been at this now, the 10th anniversary of the Burgeo fish plant is coming up in April, and they've been plugging at this now for quite some time. And what do you say to those people? Like, I'm sure you got that up to the community center this afternoon. Like, okay, well, there's crab, and there was shrimp, and then there was, now it was the seals. I mean, that's gone, this gone, that's gone, something else is gone. You know, it just seems to be that the powers that be and everybody who can make the decisions with a stroke of a pen are just sitting back and folding their arms, and it's not happening.
Well, that's the thing. And if you don't keep the pressure up, what's the options? We can be silent and do nothing, which means the game is over for good. That's not an option. You just can't sit back and let the community die without trying to do something. So you've got to keep the pressure up. There's no good of us fighting each other, like the council saying we didn't succeed, or Parsons didn't do this, or the local union didn't do this, or Bill Matthews didn't do this. We got to still keep everybody pushing to get it done, because the minute we stop pushing, and particularly if we can add the FFAW voice to that, eventually maybe something will spring loose for us. And the option is to do nothing, which to me is not an option.
But did you make that recommendation to the local union that they put pressure on the
I did. I did, and I stressed that very much, that I think they have to get to their union provincially to make them become players in this game. That's crucial.
Let's move on. That takes up, well, of course, it's very important, so it takes up a major part. But our new school, the tenders are up, I guess, pretty soon.
The tenders are closing on the school on March 28th. They were actually supposed to close about 2 weeks ago. But one of the bidders who was interested in bidding required some further information. Actually, it wasn't just one. There was 3 or 4 who came back and said they wanted some further information and drawings and so on. So the Department of Education has given those to them, and the bids are going to close now. The tender will close on the 28th. They usually take about 2 weeks then to analyze the bids and award the contract. So very pleased to see yesterday's budget. Of course, everybody was a bit nervous that what was or was not going to stay in the budget, or what things might, if any, get cut. And the Burgeo School is still in there, and we're not going to lose that. So that'll be up and going this year. Also on the water project, as anyone's aware, we had a commitment from the province to approximately $2.2 million for a new water system here. The first phase, which was done this year, we'll call it 2001-2002, and that phase was done, and the work on phase 1, even though it's all tendered and contracted out, that's not going to start until spring breaks, because by the time they got around to awarding the contract, the ground wasn't in a fit condition to do it. So phase 1 was going to start, and again, the issue was the money's there for phase 2, because that's a substantial part of it as well, $1 million plus for phase 2. And council here wants to get phase 2 done as quickly as possible. And we're trying to avoid a situation where, if it's approved in the budget, which takes effect now on April 1, and the money is there, we don't want to find ourselves with phase 1 completed, say, in July, and then we don't get the paperwork done on phase 2 until December, January, which means we're into 2003 before we get it finished. So what we're trying to do is have a complete run-in from phase 1 right on into phase 2, so that by the end of November we got it all done. And I spoke yesterday afternoon, actually, after the budget, with the Deputy Minister of Municipal Affairs, Bob Smart, and he assured me he sees no problem in doing that. So if that happens, we look like we're going to have a fair bit of construction on the go here with the school. We're going to have a fair bit of undertaking here with the water lines, and that'll be happening here in the spring, summer, fall of 2002.
This is on a totally unrelated subject. We had a resident come in our office not too long ago and spoke about that in the Peter Stroids area. There was one of the cabin owners in there was trying to have cabin rights down close to the Peter Stroids Lake, and there was some controversy about that. Do you know anything?
Yes, I am aware of it, and I'll be very careful in what I say here, because as the Minister of Justice and the Attorney General, I can't and don't get involved in any court cases, but I am aware that there was one couple who initially had problems dating back about a year, year and a half, and they tried to order them to remove their cottage from the place, which was a mobile cottage on wheels. And the first step is to take it to an appeal board. And I understand that they took it to an appeal board and they lost at the appeal level. The board ruled against them and said that they had to remove it. And I understand that they have now taken it to the Supreme Court of Newfoundland to contest that again. So I suspect, by being familiar with how the court system works, I would think that's going to probably be another year, 2, 3 years before it winds its way through the court system and you get a ruling. And while that process was unfolding with that couple, another individual contacted me to say that he now has a similar problem. So my staff, Joanne in fact, appeared with him yesterday, or Wednesday, excuse me, in Corner Brook and did his appeal. Basically the same arguments in the same case, and we do those things for people. If we can help out with an appeal for somebody, we do the paperwork or try to help them and appeal and present their case for them and so on. So Joanne appeared with this individual in Corner Brook on Wednesday. The case has been presented, and they indicated it'll take about 3 weeks to get their decision. Now, if the decision is the same as the first one that I referred to, and they say, no, you lose your case, that person intends to, again, go to court as well. So, yes, it's a problem. Yes, it's a legal matter, and it's pretty complex. Not so much from Abitibi's point of view, or the paper mills that own the land in first instance have a problem. It's got to do with the provincial zoning regulations and land use regulations. And these people are arguing, of course, that those regulations should not apply to them because their facilities were there and their rights to occupy were there long before these new development and control rules were put in place. But I suspect it'll be anywhere from 2 to 3 years before you get a resolution of that.
Yeah. In some cases, it seems to be almost a case of discrimination, as when you got a cabin owner and then you got a trailer owner, and the cabin owner wants the trailer owner out of it, type of thing. That's how it seems from where I'm sitting. I don't know a lot about it, but he just brought that up, and I thought I'd brought it.
It's an issue because a lot of people in Burgeo have properties in Peter Stride's area, and now there's different areas that have different rules as well. These incidents that you're referring to are right on the river, basically right on the lake itself, as opposed to some people have parks set up and associations that don't get affected by these rules. But it is a major concern, and I'm sure these people are determined and they're going to see it to the bitter end as to what should happen. I did a case some years ago as well when I was in law practice down here. Some individual was charged when he took what was his travel trailer and kept it on a chassis on wheels, but expanded the size of it. And we went through that case down here, many, many years ago now. And anyway, we were successful, and the court threw out the charge. So my experience inside the parks, we won that case. This now up on the river itself is new regulations that came in since that time. So it's a matter of testing the regulations and seeing if they're fair. And if they're discriminatory, they'll certainly be chucked out, no question about it.
Okay. Is there anything else you'd like to add?
Just like to say that it's nice to be back here again, meeting so many people. It's again trying because it is frustrating, and it seems like every time I come down, it's another case of frustration. But notwithstanding that, we can't quit. I realize I don't get upset. Some people think they don't want to bother me, or they think that they're pressuring me or whatever. But look, that's par for the course in this job. That's the nature of the job, is you're there to try to help people. There's hundreds of issues that we deal with from Burgeo. The plant, of course, is the biggest one, and that's the most trying, the most frustrating one that we're dealing with. But there's hundreds of other little issues that we deal with for people, and we're there to do that and continue to do that. I don't think there's anyone who tell you in the district that I don't return my phone calls and that they don't get any action from me. Don't always get the right answers, but most times we do get the right answers as well. And I said in February of 1999, when I got elected, that my #1 priority was the Burgeo plant. That hasn't changed. We've kept a running diary of what we've done trying to do something for the Burgeo plant, the groups we met and who we've met with. And right now, like, we're somewhere over the 200 mark in terms of numbers of meetings that we've had, just to try to get every possibility that we can examine to the fullest to get something done. And regardless of anyone who might feel differently, I don't intend to change that tactic. I'm not a quitter. I don't intend to quit. And I like to be prodded sometimes too, and sometimes having a good old debate makes things get more ideas on the table, and that's what it's all about. But I guess that's the bottom line, is I don't intend to quit, and I certainly hope the people of the town don't quit on me and don't quit supporting it, because if we don't do this together, there's no other option.
Well, we certainly thank you for coming and joining us, and of course when you come back in town, drop by again.
Will do. Thank you very much.
You're kindly welcome.
Stay with us for Off the Rack, the community events, and the BBS Playbill, all after this.
What if your family lived in a home on an island you couldn't leave? With limited amounts of food and safe drinking water. It would be very important to make things last, wouldn't it? Especially if your family kept growing and growing and growing. Well, it doesn't matter where your home is, because we all live on an island we can't leave. So please, use only what you need, because supplies truly are limited. We can do that.
Off the Rack. This week as we scanned our tape rack, we came across a tape of an LOBA Easter party. Let's look back to April the 3rd, 1994.
Good evening and welcome to the community event segment of tonight's broadcast. I'm Jennifer Marks. The winners of the LOBA TV Bingo were Irene Vetcher, Lucy Farrell from Grand Brit, and Ridge Durnford from Franceway. Congratulations to you all. The Sand & Sea Committee will be having the next TV Bingo on Wednesday, April 3rd at 7 p.m. There will be one game for $500. Cards are $1 each or 6 for $5 and are available from any member of the Sand & Sea Committee and are in most stores around town. Please support the Sand & Sea and play TV Bingo, and you could be the next winner of $500. The LOBA will be hosting their annual Children's Easter Party on Saturday, March 30th at 2 p.m. at the Lodge for children up to age 8. There will be a door prize to be won. Lunch will be served for $1, and tickets will be sold on a plush Easter bunny. The Easter Bunny has been invited to attend, so come to the party and join the fun. If your group or organization has an upcoming event planned, we would be happy to advertise it for you. Just call the BBS office by Wednesdays of each week to have items included in this portion of our broadcast. That concludes the community event segment of tonight's broadcast. See you next week.
BBS Playbill. Join Pans and the gang for 2 stories, a craft, and lots of fun on Saturday morning at 11 a.m. on Pansy's Garden. And I'll be here again next week with This Week in Review. For This Week in Review, I'm Marie Rose. Good night and God bless.